Welcome to today's episode of Writing Africa's Economic History Beyond One Single Story. I'm your host, Alex Rivers. Today, we're going to unpack the intricate tapestry that is Africa's economic history. It's a lot more than headlines about poverty or emerging markets.
Absolutely, Alex. It's so easy for people to see Africa through the lens of stark extremes, isn't it? It's either the hopeless continent or its latest iteration as a land of opportunity with burgeoning economies. But that narrative doesn't capture the true complexity of the continent, which is home to 48 countries and over 1 billion people, each with diverse, dynamic histories.
Exactly, Jordan. Today, we'll explore how historians actually write Africa's economic history. We will assess the shift in perspectives over the last century, from serving European empires to data-driven modern understandings. But first, we'll tackle why it's crucial to adopt an approach called writing history forwards.
Now, what does writing history forwards mean, you may ask? Instead of starting with today's problems and then digging back for convenient roots, we start from specific times and places. For example, we could look at West Africa around 1750, examining the intricate relationships between people, land, and resources.
So you're suggesting we kick things off with a snapshot of the past?
Exactly. By tracking how production methods evolved over time, we can resist the oversimplified explanations that often focus on blame, like cultural attitudes or hostile nature. Instead, we highlight the long, complex processes of change and adaptation. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. Each layer represents a different phase in Africa's economic history.
That metaphor really works here, Jordan. And speaking of layers, let's move into the forces that drive change. Scholars focus on three critical production factors: land, labor, and capital. Each interacts in unique ways to shape economic outcomes.
Right. For instance, when land is abundant but labor is scarce, societies may rely heavily on family labor or even bonded labor to ensure sufficient workers. It's a balancing act, much like a seesaw. As population increases or new technology emerges, the balance shifts. Land can become scarce, raising its value, while wage labor becomes cheaper and more available.
And it's crucial to remember that technology is a player in this dynamic as well, isn't it? New methods and tools, whether imported or locally developed, can dramatically change how land, labor, and capital interact. However, this transformation doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's all filtered through local institutions and power dynamics.
Exactly. Here's where things become fascinating. Institutions refers to the formal and informal rules governing society, laws, customs, and norms shaping who gets access to resources.
And power dynamics come into play when different groups compete for these resources, right? Think of it as a game where the rules keep changing based on who holds the power. Elites, farmers, or multinational corporations might all be trying to shape or influence these rules.
Perfect analogy. Even if it seems economically rational for societies to shift from slavery to wage labor, entrenched interests that benefit from the old systems can block progress. History evolves through human agency within these constraints, rather than being dictated solely by geography or fate.
Now, moving on to how scholars have told Africa's story over time, which really illustrates this complexity. In the early days, much research was tied to European imperial projects, framing Africa merely as a provider of labor and raw materials.
That's a critical point, Alex. Scholars often ignored the internal dynamics of African societies. However, after African nations gained independence, academic perspectives began to highlight local struggles and nation-building processes. This evolution marked a significant shift in the way history was written.
Right. During the mid-20th century, development economics pushed the idea that Africa was a latecomer, needing planning and industrialization to catch up. But then we had radical critiques that suggested underdevelopment stemmed from global capitalism and unequal exchange, not merely from domestic shortcomings.
Exactly. By the late 20th century, the focus shifted even further to the importance of institutions, property rights, state structures, and legal systems, all critical for long-term growth. This brought African economic history more in line with broader debates happening worldwide.
And we can't forget the recent qualitative and quantitative revival. Researchers began using archival records and colonial statistics to form long-term hypotheses about slavery, education, and nation formation. This quantitative revolution allows for more precise comparisons but still needs a historical context to stay relevant.
Absolutely, Alex. And the newest trend in scholarship is reciprocal comparison. Instead of treating Europe as the standard and Africa as the deviation, this approach sees every case as unique, allowing for a richer tapestry of analysis. For example, we can understand South African settler agriculture alongside West African smallholder economies without implying one is better than the other.
This perspective also firmly places Africa within global history, acknowledging that its economic pathways have been influenced by trade networks, colonialism, the Cold War, and beyond. These factors have all played huge roles in shaping contemporary Africa.
So why does reframing Africa's economic history matter today? First, it challenges lazy narratives. The idea that Africa has always been stagnant simply doesn't hold up when you trace thousands of years of changing production systems and networks.
Right, and it complicates policy discussions too. There are no simple answers to questions like, was colonialism good or bad for Africa? Or is Africa being exploited by multinational corporations today? Outcomes vary dramatically across regions, sectors, and time.
The book we're drawing from emphasizes that Africa doesn't have just one economic history, but many interwoven and dynamic narratives. Understanding these requires us to pay attention to factors like land, labor, capital, technology, institutions, and global connections.
As we move forward, especially with the continent undergoing rapid population growth and urbanization, these historical lenses will help us avoid naive optimism or cynical despair. It's about finding that balance.
That's so true, Alex. So as we wrap up today's episode, let's remember that the process to understand Africa's economic history is ongoing. It involves recognizing how historical processes shape present-day development and the myriad forces at play.
And crucially, it's about acknowledging the complex histories that each nation within Africa harbors. By embracing this complexity, we're better equipped to engage with Africa's future with informed perspectives and realistic expectations.
Well said, Alex. Thank you to our listeners for joining us today. We hope you continue exploring these themes and complexities around Africa's economic history. Until next time, take care.